Tom's tone softened when he noticed my hesitation, his voice dipping into that familiar, reassuring cadence. It's just for tax purposes. This is the best move for our family. You're always talking about being smart with our finances. His words floated in the tense air between us, but they felt heavier than usual, weighted with something unspoken. I stood in our kitchen, the soft hum of the refrigerator filling the silence, staring at the stack of papers he had just slid across our gleaming granite countertop. My heart pounded against my ribs, each beat loud in the quiet room. The bold official letterhead on the house transfer documents seemed to glare back at me, cold and unfeeling. Tom reached across the counter and took my hand, his fingers brushing against mine. But something was different. Maybe it was the way his grip didn't quite fit like it used to, or maybe it was the faint tremor in his voice, betraying a nervousness he couldn't completely hide. Upstairs, the twins were finally asleep after an exhausting day, their soft breaths a fragile layer of peace above the tension brewing below. And here I was, standing in the kitchen of the home we'd built together, facing what felt like an ultimatum from the man I'd called my husband for 4 years. My name is Caitlin Wilson. I'm 38 years old, a doctor at Houston Methodist Hospital, trained to diagnose symptoms and uncover hidden truths, but nothing in medical school prepared me for this. The gnawing doubt, the subtle shifts in tone, the paperwork that seemed to mock me with its sterile formality. Sometimes, the hardest things to see are the ones right in front of you. If you truly cared about our marriage, you'd understand why this makes sense, Tom said, pushing the papers closer to me. I bought this gorgeous Victorian house in the Heights neighborhood 2 years before I met Tom, using savings from my residency years and a lot of careful planning. Now, standing in my dream kitchen that I'd renovated myself, I was being pressured to sign away my biggest investment. He said, I'm the one keeping this family together between your crazy hospital hours and your constant exhaustion. His comments hurt, but there was a tone to them that I had never heard before, and it made me pause. As I looked at the baby monitor on the counter, I saw our twins, Emma and Ethan, sleeping soundly in their cribs. At 2 years old, they looked exactly like me with the same dark curls and olive skin, and I worked double shifts at the hospital because I wanted to give them every chance in life. Tom never seemed to get that my commitment to my work was about securing our children's future, not about ambition. I answered, I don't know, Tom, as I withdrew my hand. Something flashed across his face as I spoke. This house? It's my security. I bought it before we were married. His remarks continued to reverberate in my thoughts as I lay awake in bed that night. But something else was also reverberating. A quiet voice of warning that I couldn't completely stop. Was it anger, frustration, whatever it was, it vanished swiftly, replaced by what appeared to be practiced care. When I was preparing for my shift at the hospital the following morning, I noticed that Tom had been acting strangely lately. He had been more aloof, had been working longer hours at his marketing firm, and was always checking his phone. I had dismissed this as work stress, but now, along with this sudden push around the house, my medical instincts were telling me that something wasn't right. As I hurried around the kitchen, attempting to pack the twins' daycare bags while scarfing down a piece of toast, Tom said, I dropped your jacket off at the dry cleaners. You can thank me later. His smile was forced, and he hardly looked up from his phone. When I watched him strapping Emma and Ethan into their car seats, I noticed a bounce in his step that hadn't been there in years, and he had resumed going to the gym 6 months ago. He would have been helping me with the twins' bags and making sure I ate a healthy meal before my shift. Tiny adjustments that, although seemingly innocuous on their own, combined to create a picture I wasn't sure I wanted to see. I contacted my friend Nina, a real estate lawyer, in between patients at work and said, something feels off, sneaking into an empty exam room. He's pushing hard for this transfer, claiming it's for tax grounds, but tax considerations, Nina cut in. Caitlin, since you purchased the house before getting married, moving it to his name would complicate matters rather than provide any tax benefits. My blood froze. Tom had expected me to be so busy with work and the twins that I hadn't done my homework. Pay close attention, Nina said, her tone solemn. Avoid signing anything. I don't want to startle you, but I've noticed that men typically don't insist on property transfers unless they have a specific strategy. During a brief intermission between appointments that afternoon, I did something I had never done before. I looked up our phone records. 4 months. Tom had been calling the same number frequently. I ran a reverse lookup with shaking hands and a name came up, Destiny Martinez. A brief search on social media showed a stunning woman in her mid-20s whose check-ins coincided with Tom's late work evenings. As I was looking through her pictures, I stopped at one from 2 weeks ago where she was at a real estate office with the message, "New chapter's coming. New chapter." It made my stomach turn. Blessed having learned to trust my gut when anything seemed strange from years of medical training, I shut the door to my office and sat quietly, my thoughts whirling. These same instincts were now telling me that I needed to safeguard both myself and my kids. So that night, for the first time in months, I left work early and drove directly to a covert electronics store Nina had suggested, rather than picking up the twins from daycare. When I explained what I needed, a top-notch recording device that was small enough to conceal in my kitchen, the old man behind the counter hardly blinked. "Protect yourself," he whispered softly as he demonstrated how to use it. I arrived home before Tom, set up the gadget, and started supper like any other night, and he appeared shocked to see me there. "That's the best evidence in their own words. I thought we could chat more about the house transfer," I added, stirring the pasta sauce. "I've been thinking about what you said. No emergencies at the hospital today?" he inquired, his eyes piercing but his tone calm. His face lit up with poorly disguised triumph as I observed his reflection in the kitchen window. "I knew you'd come around," he said as he approached me from behind. "Kate, you're making the right choice. This is best for our family." His emphasis on family made me shiver. I listened to him throughout dinner, taking notes as he described his complex strategy for how the transfer would help us. He had been planning this for months, and I knew with a sickening clarity that each lie was deliberate and well planned. I sat in their dark room and watched the twins sleep, Emma holding on to her favorite stuffed giraffe while Ethan kicked off his blanket as usual. The next several days were a blur of meticulous preparation, and I felt a wave of protective wrath as I looked at their placid faces. Whatever game Tom was playing, he hadn't accounted for a mother's need to defend her cubs. Following Nina's advice, I copied all our financial records, got new credit cards in my name only, and began moving my share of our savings to a different account. The final transfer papers were brought home by Tom a week later, and I lay awake beside him every night, listening to his steady breathing and wondering when exactly my husband had become a stranger. I picked up the pen, my hand firm despite the adrenaline rushing through my veins, and he added, "Just your signature," passing them over the desk, the same area where this had all begun so that we could put it all behind us. As I held the pen over the signature line, Tom stared closely. I could see everything in that instant, his impatience, his barely disguised enthusiasm, and the way he kept checking his phone, as though he was anticipating a message. The color left his face so quickly that I nearly burst out laughing, but this wasn't humorous. Actually said, setting the pen down, "I think we need to talk about destiny first." "What are you talking about?" Tom stuttered, but his expression had told him, his professional demeanor crumbling as he went reflexively for his phone. This was the start of a war, and I was armed with evidence, resolve, and a mother's rage. Who is Destiny? I took out my own phone and scrolled through the screenshots I had meticulously gathered. "You been having lunch with 26-year-old Destiny Martinez at Lorenzo's 3 times a week for the last 4 months. By the way, that's the same place where you proposed to me. Nice touch." Tom's face changed from shock to angry. He sat down heavily on one of the kitchen stools, running his hands through his hair, a nervous habit I'd once found endearing. "It's not what you think, really? Because I think you're trying to steal my house to move in with your girlfriend." "You've been spying on me?" I corrected, maintaining a steady voice despite my racing heart. "And just like you've been protecting our tax situation with this house transfer, right?" he said. Tom looked upstairs, and for a second, I saw a flash of guilt on his face as I played the recording from earlier that week, his voice filling the kitchen as he told Destiny that everything was going well and they would soon be together, the twins' monitor crackling with Emma's gentle whimpers. But it was guilt over getting caught, not remorse about abandoning his family. "You don't understand," he said, adopting the conciliatory tone he employed with challenging clients. "We haven't been on good terms for a while. You're constantly at the hospital and the twins hardly know you." "Don't you dare," I interrupted him, my voice quiet but piercing. He jumped up abruptly, his face flushed with rage, saying, "Don't you dare use our children to justify this. I work to give them a future. What's your excuse for destroying their present? You think you're so smart, don't you? The smart doctor, always one step ahead. But you don't know what it's like to be the guy who married up and live in your shadow. Destiny knows how much I mean to her. The house I bought before I knew you, the house where our children were born, our lawyer said." "Your lawyer," I corrected. "She knows you're trying to take my house?" I interrupted. He has a reputation for helping men conceal assets during divorces, so Nina informed me about the man you've been meeting with behind my back. I talk to a lot of people, Tom. I may be busy with work, but I'm not a moron. You spoke to Nina? Tom's face went white. The baby monitor crackled again, this time with Ethan's cry joining his sister's, and Tom walked toward the stairs, but I blocked his path. I took out another stack of papers, bank statements, phone records, and emails I'd recovered. Did you really think I wouldn't figure it out? Did I just sign away my children's home because you batted your eyes and mentioned taxes? I responded icily, don't bother. I'll look after our kids. You can explain to Destiny why the setting of her next chapter will be different than she had intended. Tom's phone pinging as I was going upstairs to console our twins was likely Destiny wondering why her knight in shining armor was running late for their meeting. Let her wonder. This isn't over, Tom called after me as I reached the top of the stairs. You're making a major mistake. I had more important things to think about, like safeguarding my children's future from the man who was meant to help me build it. I stopped staring down at him from the landing. No, Tom. I made a big mistake by assuming I wouldn't defend what was rightfully mine. When I woke up the following morning, I saw that Tom had left, most likely spending the night at Destiny's, and as I was getting the twins ready for daycare, my phone buzzed with a text from Nina. I ignored his flushed face and went to the nursery, where Emma and Ethan needed me. He's seen his lawyer, so it's time to act quickly. I had previously planned for this. I met with James Cooper, the divorce lawyer Nina suggested during my lunch break. Unlike the sterile business settings I had anticipated, his office was friendly and inviting. Dr. Wilson, he continued, examining the material I had collected, I must say, I'm impressed. You've given us everything we need to get ahead of this. I had good instincts, I said, observing him review the recordings. Most clients come to me after the fact. These recordings are unmistakable proof of intent to defraud, and the paper trail of his meetings with that other lawyer, well, let's just say judges don't like deliberate asset concealing. Better than good. He grinned. We need to talk. You're being crazy. Tom's messages flooded my phone while we were talking strategy. Consider the twins. James noted that he was becoming aware that his plan was failing and that each communication was more urgent than the one before it. They frequently get vicious, so be ready. He was correct. Tom's good guy persona had completely fallen apart by the time he returned home that evening. You think you're so smart, he said sneeringly, barging into the kitchen as I was preparing dinner for the twins. But you've just ruined everything. I couldn't help but laugh, which just made him more angry. Destiny and I could have been nice about this. Let you remain in the guest home. Keep things cordial for the kids. Emma jumped in her high chair when he yelled, the guest house? In my own home? Our home? That I'm at? Ethan inquired, his tiny face contorting in concern. I've lived here for 4 years. I gave Tom a caution glance and reassured him. Dada's just tired. Like hell I am, Tom grumbled, but his voice was hushed now that he was aware of the twins' presence. Actually, you are, I answered coolly as I took out another paper from my bag. A temporary restraining order, which my lawyer had filed this morning in response to your text threat. He muttered, his face pallid. You have an hour to pack your things. I already did. You can't do this. And Tom, I steadily looked into his eyes. You're welcome in Destiny, but this house, the one you attempted to take from your kids, is mine. He stood there, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water as the reality of his predicament finally set in. The disintegration of his immaculate plan written all over his face. And if you think I won't fight you with everything I have, you obviously never knew me at all. An hour later, the twins were playing quietly with their blocks behind me, blissfully oblivious that their father was departing, and I watched from the window of the nursery as Tom packed his luggage into his car, glancing back at the house as if he still couldn't believe his plan had gone so horribly wrong. Emma saw me at the window and said, bye-bye, yes, darling, Daddy is leaving for a while. The following weeks were a haze of court appearances and hospital shifts, and Tom launched a full-scale assault through his lawyer, seeking half of everything, including the house, as I held her close and breathed in the aroma of her baby shampoo, allowing it to ground me. However, James was prepared for him. During one of our sessions, James asked, did you see his face when we presented the recordings in court? He believed he was very smart, but he never dreamed you may be smarter. In addition to proving that he intended to rob me of my premarital asset, we had also discovered something much more troubling. Tom had been embezzling money from his marketing company to pay for his extravagant outings with Destiny. The irony didn't escape my notice as James threw out bank statements across his desk and explained, Our forensic accountant found everything. He's been cooking the books for months, likely to keep up the lifestyle he promised Destiny. When Tom's firm found out about the embezzlement, they filed charges. And it turned out that Destiny had no interest in the lover facing criminal charges. All those times Tom had grumbled about living in my shadow, about feeling inadequate to my accomplishment, had become his own downfall. He arrived at the house one night, intoxicated, waving his phone and pleading to come home. "You did this to me," he said from the front yard, causing me to call the police. I know this because she texted him to break up with him. "You've destroyed everything." I felt a strange mixture of relief and sympathy as the officers carried him away. The guy I'd married and the father of my kids had changed into someone I didn't know, or perhaps he had been that person all along, and I had been too busy to notice. The divorce went more quickly than I had anticipated. Tom, who was having legal issues with his firm and couldn't afford a drawn-out court battle, agreed to give up any claim to the house in exchange for better custody terms, including twice weekly supervised visits. Weeks after everything had calmed down, Nina told me over coffee, "You've handled this incredibly well. Most people would have crumbled, and I watched Emma and Ethan play in my backyard, my house, and my win. I had to be strong for them," I answered. "And to be honest, Tom's biggest mistake was underestimating me." Nina added, "And Destiny. Do you know what happened to her?" I grinned, recalling the last tidbit of rumors I had heard. Ethan inquired, "Mama's sad," as I put the twins to bed later that night. "No, baby," I replied, kissing his forehead. "Apparently she's dating her real estate agent now, the one who was supposed to help her move into my house." We both smiled at the irony. The aftermath of my divorce from Tom offered unexpected blessings, and for the first time in months, I genuinely meant it. Mama isn't upset at all. The biggest surprise wasn't that I could handle everything by myself. I'd always been able to do that, but rather how much simpler life became when I wasn't constantly burdened by Tom's deceit. I was elevated to chief of emergency medicine, something Tom had always stated would not be feasible while raising twins, and my career took off without his subtly disparaging and passive-aggressive remarks about my hours. Initially, I was concerned about how the twins would handle the changes, but they fared much better than I had anticipated. As Tom's legal issues worsened, they reduced the frequency of their supervised meetings with him. He eventually accepted a plea bargain for the embezzlement charges, and after serving his term, relocated to Dallas, and I learned through mutual connections that Destiny had moved on to another affluent target. In a sense, she had escaped a bullet, though I doubt she saw it that way. My house, which Tom had worked so hard to steal away from me, turned into a true haven, and I occasionally wondered whether she ever knew how close she'd come to becoming entangled in Tom's web of lies. Nina taunted me about dating again, but I was happy to concentrate on my profession and kids, and every mortgage payment felt like a victory, a reminder of how I had preserved what was mine. I made the house I'd always dreamed of, remodeled the twins' rooms, and planted a garden. For now, I was content with the tranquility that came from knowing that I had not only survived Tom's treachery, but also come out stronger. One quiet evening, I sat on my porch and watched Emma and Ethan play in our front yard, and I thought about how different life had become. There would be time for romance later. Tom's fall from grace had been spectacular, from marketing executive to convicted felon, from family man to cautionary tale. The twins were running around, their laughter resonating through the neighborhood, the same yard where Tom had stood that night, drunk and ranting about how I'd ruined his life. I had recently heard through the hospital grapevine that Tom and Destiny had briefly reconnected in Dallas, only to split again when she found out he was still on probation and working as a junior copywriter at a small agency. The irony that his desperate attempt to get my house had cost him everything: his job, his freedom, and most importantly, his relationship with his kids, was not lost on me. The twins hardly remembered their everyday lives with him. He had turned into the overly ambitious father they saw only on the weekends, constantly trying too hard with pricey presents and fake excitement. "Mama, look!" Emma exclaimed, her face glowing with pride as she executed a wobbly cartwheel, landing with a triumphant grin. Ethan clapped enthusiastically, his laughter echoing through the crisp afternoon air. In that moment, I realized it wasn't about the house, the legal battles, or outsmarting Tom's schemes. What truly mattered was this: the simple, unfiltered joy of watching my children flourish, their spirits untouched by the chaos of the past. Just a few days earlier, I had received a letter from Tom, heavy with regrets and neatly crafted apologies. His words, carefully chosen, tried to stitch together something already beyond repair. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Instead, I quietly filed it away, like a chapter of a book I had no desire to reread. Some bridges, once burned, aren't meant to be rebuilt. They serve their purpose in reminding us where not to cross again. My focus shifted to constructing new bridges, once built on stronger foundations. I poured my energy into nurturing deeper connections with Emma and Ethan, investing in my work, and most importantly, reclaiming my dignity. Life isn't about the pieces we lose, it's about what we choose to build from the ones that remain. If stories of resilience, growth, and personal triumph inspire you, don't forget to subscribe to the SoraBook channel. There are many more powerful stories waiting to unfold in the next videos.